Jim, thanks for letting me come up and do this.
You bet, John.
I've been trying to nail you and Stacy Ellison for a long time, so
Yeah.
I go talk to Stacy tomorrow.
Oh, good.
I'm going to start with a question that is a little long, but I bet nobody's ever asked you for all of your speaking engagements and press conferences and so forth. My first show of climbing sort of a situation was, of all places, in the Washington National Cathedral in D.C. And it was the young guy who started the Marmot wonderful down jackets and sleeping bags and all that. So I walk into the cathedral, and here is a rack of about 10 slide projectors. And it was a wonderful show about Patagonia. There wasn't any climbing in it, but he had traveled, and it showed people, and it was fascinating, and he had kind of flute music, and then segued to the American Alpine Club meetings, and these young climbers mostly come in with their 10 projectors and their rock music and on like that. So I go back to when Jim Whittaker came to a new REI store, I think in Falls Church, Virginia. And I went over to see him, and I can't think what year, but late 90s, I suppose. And Jim had, I think, 9 slides. And the 9 slides were not the kind of thing that would be printed in the National Geographic, as I recall. And at the same time, you had us rolling in the aisles laughing, or sitting on the edge of our chairs listening to you. How did you do that? How do you do a presentation like that?
Well, people like good stories, and I've always been a storyteller, and so that's basically what it is. And there are lots of humorous situations anywhere in the world, in the mountains or and so you joke about those things. So it's just kind of a fun thing. And then if you've got the audience sort of, kindred spirits, then it makes it a lot easier.
Well, it was a terrific show.
Oh, thank you.
And I suppose you've had a little practice.
I've done a few of them, yes.
Do you still use the 9 slides?
I know, we're now, it's a modern age, and we're using a point presentation,
PowerPoint?
PowerPoint, and tied in with a little music and some rapid movement and so forth. It makes it a little more interesting.
Well, if you come to Tucson or wherever, then I'll still go see you.
Yeah.
I recall that you and Lou, when you were young, were once tested, and you had the greatest lung capacity of anybody who had ever been tested up to that point?
Well, I don't know if that's true, but we did have larger lungs. 7-liter lung, they called it. We had asthma as children.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that probably expanded our lung capacity. And then we also did prone pressing with an idea of increasing the rib cage area to allow more lungs to come in. So
I'm sorry.
a prone press with weights.
I see.
Lifting weights and with breath held and so forth to expand rib cage and strengthen it and so forth. But no, we do have lungs that are a little bit bigger. I don't know how Ed Viesters, that's done all 14 of the 8,000 meter peaks. He's got a larger lung capacity as well. He's over 7 liters. I don't know how we rate next to him, but I think there's no question that a larger lung area helps high altitude climbing.
Let's stop there for a minute. The thing that I've always found is it does help to get acclimatized. Living in Washington, D.C. for 40 years or so at sea level, and then going to the mountains. But someone has said that I respected, the only way to get acclimatized to climbing is to climb.
Well, that's true, but it's also true. I guided on Rainier for a considerable length of time. We found that people coming from Denver had a greater success rate to the summit of Rainier than those coming from Seattle at sea level. So that mile high helped them greatly in acclimatization. So I've found in all of my climbing and altitude and in Everest and everywhere, K2 and all of those places, that acclimatization is one of the most important things you can do. And so the people that try and climb high without any acclimatization get in real trouble. And so the key is to stay high. If you're going to do Rainier, go up a week early, live at 5,000 feet, hike up to 10, come back down, sleep low, go up and down a bit, and it makes it a much easier climb.
Well, on Everest, the trek up has always helped, hasn't it? To get the climbers used to the altitude?
Yeah, although now they fly in to about, to Lukland, which is, man, it saves you about 140 miles of walking.
Right.
And so that's a good deal. And you'll acclimatize on the way up because you walk from there to 17.5 or 18. So that's really all you need. Although if you do it really fast, you might want to sit at base camp a little bit before you go to the summit.
And everybody's different in terms of what they can endure, obviously.
That's right.
And, you take Nancy Fagan, who's done Everest, and Stacy Allison, and I could put them in an expedition backpack. I couldn't carry them, but I could.
No, it's not how big you are, it's how tight you're wound.
Yeah.
That's what we said about the Sherpa, too.
Yeah. The motivation.
Right.
Well, Sir Edmund Hillary does not agree with your statement about the flying in. He said the biggest mistake I ever made was getting that airfield going.
Well, that's because his wife and daughter were killed in a plane crash to that airfield. I'm sure he would feel that way.
No, but he also, the one thing that was the soundbite, the only one I saw on the 50th anniversary tour, he went to Nepal first to be with the Sherpas, and they were having a dinner, and some guy got a video camera in and got him saying that all of those people that are going up there to get drunk to observe my anniversary are crazy, and I don't like it. But that has made a lot of difference, like the doing McKinley or Denali, whichever you prefer, getting a lift up there. And because originally people walked in through the swamps and all, did they not?
Right.
What year did you climb, I'm going to call it McKinley?
1960.
Yeah, and who were some of your team members?
Well, in 1960 we did McKinley, and the team was John Day, who had hired us as guides, hired Louis and I as guides, and the other team member was Pete Schoening. So there are four of us in the party.
Now, Pete is still here?
No, Pete just passed away.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I didn't know that. I have interviewed him. Anyway, so McKinley was your first big one?
Well, yeah, we've done Rainier a lot, I suppose 40 or 50 times.
Right.
McKinley was the next highest. And then from there, we went to Everest. I went to Everest.
Yeah. In '63.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about how that was organized. Who paid for it, supported you, who? Well,
Norman Durnford was the leader, and he'd been on a Swiss expedition that had attempted. He decided that an American team might have a chance to get the mountain if there could be funding. And so that began a long ordeal of trying to raise money for that climb. And I got a call in 1960 to see if I would be a member, and I said yes. And so he went around the country then beating on doors. National Geographic was the largest contributor. But there were also 5 scientific projects that we had that we took in order to get the money to launch the expedition. So we had those 5 obligations, and as a consequence, out of a 19-person team, almost half were scientists that came along to do scientific research and study on the mountain.
To climb?
Well, not necessarily to climb. They were more scientific researchers to back up the 5 programs that we had. We had a psychological study, we had physiological studies, we had glacier studies. We did a lot of different things, and so a lot of the team that was their primary function, their main purpose on the team.
Geographic was one of the sponsors for Hillary's climb.
Correct.
And the one thing that I've never asked anybody, I've certainly wondered about, is that we started in the 30s trying to climb K2. The Americans were focused on K2. And why did it take even 10 years after Hillary's being the first to make the first ascent? Why did it take, I mean, where were the Americans where they were not interested in Everest? Was there a political thing with Nepal or something that kept us from going there?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you meant. In other words, why did we not do Everest?
Yeah, why did not the Americans like Jack Durrance, Charles Houston, Bob Bates, why did they not try Everest?
Well, Everest had not been climbed when they tried K2, and so K2 was another target. Everest was closed through China and through Tibet, and so apparently K2 was open to through Pakistan, and that's why they attempted it. There'd been other attempts, but they failed as well. So you know, it's a high mountain. It's very attractive, second highest in the world. It was a good effort on their part. I know Molinar, all those guys personally. I was actually stationed in the Army. I've been drafted in the Korean War, and I was in the Rockies when Bob Craig, who was a member of the team, and D. Molinar came to be cadre. They were paid by the Army to teach mountain climbing to the 10 Special Forces. And so I was part of the cadre too, and so they told the stories when they came back. I remember Craig showing me the holes that he had in the heels of his feet from lying prone in the, he called it the K2 position, horizontal, because being trapped by storm and so forth, and his feet were touching through the sleeping bag, were almost on ice, and they froze their heels. Anyway, why they tried K2, I think maybe, you know, it was about the same time the British had a permit for Everest in '53. So I don't know. You know, certainly it was a very respectable target, K2, the second highest in the world, only a few hundred feet lower than Everest.
Yeah, well, but your major achievement was climbing Everest, the first American male to do that, and it's still a very big thing. And I frankly can't remember. I know that a lot of people have climbed K2 now, but
much fewer than Everest. And Hornbein says my major achievement was the 1990 peace climb that I led to Everest.
Well, that was no small thing. Tell us about it.
And that was a climb for world peace. At that time we had the Cold War, and were threatened with the greatest environmental threat to the world, atomic bombs, and the annihilation of the human race. And so we decided to have a summit of summits where the Soviets, Chinese, and Americans would stand on the highest point of Earth with their arms around each other, demonstrating to the world what could be done through friendship and cooperation. And so we thought we'd have on the highest point of Earth, we'd stand there with our enemies, people that we spent billions of dollars getting ready to kill. And so we did this before the wall came down. We went over there in Moscow and went to China, to put this thing together. The Chinese said we haven't had Soviets in our country for 30 years. I said, exactly, this is an opportunity. And I discussed it with them, and then went to the Soviet Union, and they said, we'd like to go, but we won't until the Chinese invite us. And the Chinese then, I went back and said, we don't want to invite them unless we're sure they'll come. And you determine no one wants to lose face. And so we worked back and forth until they finally said, Mr. Whittaker, you may bring your Soviet friends to climb Mount Everest, but we will not participate. And I said, why not? You're our enemies. You have to participate. This is a climb for world peace. And he said, and I learned something about them then, they said the Chinese have not had the advantages that the Soviets and Americans have had in mountaineering. And I thought, oh, okay, they don't want to lose face by not. So I said, we'll guarantee that no one country will go to the summit alone, or no two countries. All three countries go to the summit, or no countries will go to the summit. I said, and if we do this, if the Chinese is below the summit, we'll drag them up to the top, pose for a picture, and drag them back down. And finally they said, we will be 100% participants in your expedition.
This obviously costs a lot of money, what you're talking about.
It cost $1 million.
Yeah, $1 million. Well, even as you and I talked at this moment, there are climbers out there trying to raise money for big expeditions. And that $1 million at the time must have been
hard to come by.
Hard to come by, but also maybe the biggest amount ever raised for whatever.
But the cause for world peace meant I could go to Boeing, where I got 50,000. The cause for the environment, it was also an Earth Day celebration, because it was 20 years from Earth Day in 1970. And so we could begin to clean the world off from the top down. So he took 2 tons of garbage off the mountain and buried it at base camp. So here was a climb for both good causes, and that made it relatively easy. The first money I got, I was sitting with L.L. Bean, Leon Gorman, the president of L.L. Bean, at a sports thing. We know each other from the industry, sports industry. And I was telling him my plan to raise 100,000 from 10 companies to do this, and he said, "Oh, that sounds great, Jim." While I'm talking, he pulled a checkbook out of his jacket pocket and was writing, and he handed me a check for $100,000. He said, "Here, this is your start."
That doesn't happen very often, does it?
That doesn't happen very often.
Well, I'm not trying to top you, and this isn't about me, but when I moved to Arizona to really focus on these interviews, editing, I now have 45 or 50 of noted climbers. I sent out a letter. I mean, I've been in the communications business. I've written pitch letters, and I sent out a letter to virtually every outfitter in the country. And do you know something? I was not turned down by anybody. What happened was not one single company responded. Not even a form postcard or form letter. Nobody. Not North Face, Patagonia, whatever.
No.
Marmot.
Zilch.
Gore.
Zero. Net.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. So that's where I've been with zero contributions, except for friends like Clarence Cross, formerly with CBS Sports and News. Who?
Well, hell, John, maybe your letter was not your letter wasn't that good. Who knows?
You know something? I absolutely agree with you, because one thing that I have not been ever able to do is to pitch myself.
Yeah, I know, it's hard to pitch.
It is.
It's hard to pitch.
Well, some people have a knack for it, but I do not, and I would agree with you.
No, it's tough. Well, see, we have to go to people and say, this is a great opportunity. You could be a part of this thing, and so we got Boeing, we got, we raised the 100,000. It took, the million. It took a little effort afterward with a few lectures around the country, but we pulled off. The Guinness World Book of Records wrote it up as the most successful climb in Everest history. We put 20 people on the summit. We did 5 without bottled oxygen. Nobody lost a finger or a toe, anything in frostbite. No one was killed. It was just a wonderful event.
That is. Okay. Let's talk about the Kennedys, and we'll get back to Everest and other places, because you and I have a mutual connection with Bobby. I was Bob's press office manager when he ran for the Senate in '64, and spent some time with him. But you took him up a mountain, or you went, maybe if he were alive, he'd prefer to say you went with him up a mountain. Tell us how that came together.
Well, the president, John Kennedy, was assassinated 5 months after I received a medal from him, the Hubbard Award, back in the Rose Garden.
What's the award again?
Hubbard Medal.
Yes.
It's given to Perry and
Yeah. Great Adventure Award.
Lindbergh, and yeah, it's a nice medal. It's an honor from the Geographic Giving by the president. And so I got a medal from him, and then 5 months later he was assassinated, and the Canadian government named their highest unclimbed mountain in Canada, Mount Kennedy, after him. So this was a target that had never been climbed, and it was the 14,000er up in the Whitehorse range. And so it became a mountaineering target in a sense. I thought, what the heck, it'd be fun to stand on the summit of that Mount Kennedy, since I was thinking my connection with him and so forth. So I started to organize it, called the Geographic. They said, yes, we'll help fund it. Then I began to put together a team, and they called and said, would you be interested in taking Senator Robert Kennedy up with you? He expressed it.
Had you ever met him?
No. I said, has he ever climbed before? They said, no. I said, does he know this is the first ascent? The mountain's never been climbed? He said, yes. So I said, yeah, okay, well, if he's interested, we'll see if we can get him up there. So I called him and talked to him about it, and he said, yes, if you'd like to go. I called a few weeks later and said, what are you doing to get in shape? He said, I'm practicing running up and down the stairs hollering help. So that was Bobby. And
I want to come back to that, the humor, but anyway, go ahead.
And so he went to Abercrombie and Fitch to get outfitted. Came out in a yellow sailing coat, and so I outfitted him from REI, and we got on the plane, flew up. Had interesting. Washburn was with us. He was doing a survey of the mountain.
The Kennedys are always good news, so let's keep talking about that climb, because I followed it with a lot of interest. And what was the approach? Were you able to fly in, or?
Yeah, no, we flew into Whitehorse. That's where the iceworms wiggle their purple heads in the crust of the pale blue snow. Robert W. Service country, huh?
Right.
And we were there wondering how to get into the base of Kennedy when this huge Canadian Air Force chopper landed. They're going these great big old banana choppers. And it was there, and Washburn said, let me go over and talk to that pilot. And so he arranged a flight to have us dropped in to the base of Mount Kennedy, which was great.
Which was how far from whatever you had to trek in or whatever?
Well,
what did he save you?
From Whitehorse, it probably saved us over 100 miles.
Wow, that's pretty.
Through Arctic country, yeah.
Pretty nice.
So that was a good deal, and we landed and set up our camp. Washburn went back with the chopper, and we started to climb the mountain. Had a great climb. He was in good shape. I was impressed with the condition that he was in. The press said I hauled him up, but that wasn't true. He was in really good shape. In fact, better shape than some of my team. that I picked to go.
Well, who were some of the team? Because I don't know.
We had Molinar, George Center. I had Barry Prater, who'd been with me on Everest. And there was a Canadian fellow that we had, a climber, to sort of make it a Canadian because we were on a Canadian mountain. So we pulled that together, and it was a small group, but I had an advanced party that went up and put in an ice cave partway up the mountain, so we could, Bobby and I could walk up with a couple of others and just move right into the cave. That was our second camp. Then we had another camp higher, a tent, and that was a stormy night. And then we woke up to a beautiful day and did the ascent. Stood on the summit. I stopped with Prather. Prather was on my rope. Bobby was in the middle. Prather was number 3. And so we stood there. I stopped, took in the rope on Bobby. Bobby took in the rope for Prather. And I pointed to the summit. We were about 50 feet below, and I said, "It's yours, Bobby." And he said, "Is it okay to go?" And I said, "You bet." And so he was the first person to stand on the top of the peak named after his brother.
This is quite remarkable. How did you, I'm not looking for tales out of school, but you mentioned his sense of humor. There are so many people, especially politicians, who somehow get a persona or a perception by the public, and Bobby's was, of course, being a very tough guy and dealing with everyone. But I found he had a great sense of humor.
You bet.
So it must have been kind of fun, and in that kind of an athletic sport deal. I'm sure that you remember any of the other funny incidents.
Well, he always had a sense of humor. We skied at some valley together. He broke my ski pole, and I gave him hell for that, and he gave me hell for giving him hell, and made a lot of fun out of it, and so forth. And he ran into me coming down and stuff. But we had a lot of fun together. Skiing, we floated rivers. We did a lot of stuff. It was really fun, and he was just a wonderful guy. So.
But you were with him when he was killed.
I was with him when he died. I was in the hospital room with Bobby and Ethel and Teddy. And yeah, that was a tough time. But at the time I was running his campaign up here in Seattle, so I didn't hear about him being shot until I'd left. I had a event going at the Olympic Hotel, which is now the Four Seasons, and I had speakers set up so we could talk to Bobby after he won the primary. So he was going to go down to talk to the crowd at the Ambassador Hotel, and I spoke to him on the loudspeaker and congratulated him, and he said thank all the delegates for their support. They're in the room, and I said, good going, we love you, and hung up and drove over to home. And on the radio I heard that he'd been shot, so I turned around and went down to the airport, and they flew me down first class to, I jumped in, I said, I've got to go down to my friend. They realized who I was, and so I went in, they took me to the hospital, and then I sat with Bobby until they had to pull the plug on him. So that was a tough one. We flew back in Air Force One, and had the funeral at St. Patrick's in New York, then took the train down to Arlington where we buried him. That was a tough one.
I'm sure it was. You lost a guy that you'd had a lot of fun with over the years.
Well, and it changed the course of history. That piece of lead changed the course of history, and I'm sure of it.
No doubt about it. Well, what about getting back to Everest? You put a team of 20 on the summit, correct?
Yes, in 1990.
In 90, for
Soviet, Chinese, and Americans.
the peacetime, yeah.
Right.
What do you think about the professional guiding? I think maybe I should back up. You've had a professional guiding service, right, on
Yes,
Whittaker?
right.
Yeah. You still have it?
No, my brother's son is running that. Peter Whittaker is running the guide service.
You're, I don't know if I mentioned it, but
they're just being their contract is just being examined. They want 2 other guide services to be on the mountain, which would make 3. And so it looks like that'll happen, and it'll be a 10-year contract.
But what I wanted to ask about was, what is your view on Rainier, something, other mountains, the Colorado 1400s, 14,000,
And guiding people up Everest now for a high fee.
Yeah.
That's what you're interested in.
Yeah, I'd like to know your view on it.
Right. I've got both views as a guide. I think that if I could take 4 people and make $250,000, $250,000 by taking 4 people over on Everest and up toward the summit, then that'd be a pretty good deal for a guide. On the other hand, if I was a client and depended entirely on the guide and had not been in high elevations or had not done a lot of climbing, I'd be foolish to think that the guide could help me near the summit of Everest when things happen that are uncontrollable. And so I'd rather see the client pay $65,000 to see if he could climb Everest than to pay $65,000 to shoot some beautiful exotic game animal so he could enter the World Book of Records by killing one of the most magnificent game animals on Earth. And there are people that go out with the Boone and Crockett Club to kill and stop the DNA of some very beautiful animals. And they pay about the same amount of money. So yeah, I'd encourage them to try and climb Everest, but just to know that they're going to have to be in the best condition they've ever been in their life, and that they'll be responsible for themselves, and the guide might not be able to help them.
Well, I just finished editing Dick Bass, the first guy to climb
All 7 summits.
do the 7 summits, the highest point on the 7 continents. And I really enjoyed talking to him. But that was a very controversial endeavor on his part. I remember the climbing magazines and otherwise that this whole thing was about some wealthy guy from Dallas who was paying
He spent $3 million to try and get up the mountain. He didn't do it the first time.
4 times.
Right.
Yeah, 4 times.
Yeah, after three attempts.
But I think he may have started out, and I believe wrote the book with Rick Ridgway, and there was the perception that maybe Rick or whoever the guys were went with him on the big ones, McKinley, whatever, were sort of pulling him up.
Well, he admits that he didn't know what he was doing, didn't he, in the interview? And that the Sherpas carried his oxygen, and that he almost died when he made a misstep near the summit. Doesn't he admit that? Or?
Well, he talked about Marty Ahoy, who was a part of his ski patrol at the snowboard ski resort by Salt Lake, which he owns. He talked about Marty somehow, and you know what happens, somehow stepped backwards, and she wasn't tied in.
No, she was tied in, but her harness was
loose,
not buckled through the leg, so she only had a waist harness on, and she flipped upside down, and Wickwire saw her slide off the
slipped through. Slipped through it.
Yeah, it slipped off. It
Yeah.
slipped off her.
Yeah.
But she was tied into with a harness. The harness was tied into the rope, but the harness was not. She'd cut off the leg so she could walk better uphill without the strap under the buttock,
Right.
and so she just had a waistband on her sling, and that was a mistake.
Well, obviously having the money helped, but I would have to come down on Dick's side on this, that as you know, when you get 30,000 feet up with or without oxygen, it's a little hard to pull somebody up.
Well, that's what Hall and Scott Fisher found out the hard way.
Dick Bass was telling me when I interviewed him that this keeping his mind focused by going through poetry in his head kept his mind off of the pack on his back and the sled he was carrying, and all the way he worked to, that was McKinley, this worked for Everest for him. And so I understand that you know a rather famous poem.
Yeah, well, you know, if you're up on an expedition for 4 months, on K2 I went twice, so you're up there in those tents, you know, and you got the 5-day snowfall. What do? You read everything, and then you ask somebody else, you read it again, and then you begin to read the labels on the parkas and the food labels, anything, so you can read. You're just desperate. And so you memorize poems and so forth, like there's strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold, and the Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge when I cremated Sam McGee. Now Sam was a man from Tennessee where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but that land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd rather live in hell. It was Christmas Day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk about cold through the parka fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. Our eyes we'd close and the lashes they froze, till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. So they're great poems by Robert W. Service, and
yeah.
I tell people that the Mount Kennedy climb was in the land of where the iceworms wiggle their purple heads in the crust of the pale blue snow. But it's he was a great writer. I loved his poems.
Yeah, well. Thank you very much for doing that. In the context of the framework of your life, how does the Everest fame fit in?
Well, my first climb in 1963 opened a lot of doors. So when I came back, I was amazed at you know, I had a parade in Seattle. It was, you know,
The White House visit?
Everything, a White House visit, you know, and opened a lot of doors. So I could walk into a Senate, any senator, and they'd say, oh, you're the guy, you know, climbed Everest, tell me about it, you know. So it opened a lot of doors. I was, you know, named one of the 10 outstanding young men of the nation. I was,
by the JCs.
You know, lots of different thing. So but that was then, and this is now. So my son said, I was talking to him, and he said, I said something about, do the kids know anything about climbing? He said, no. He said they weren't born, most of his friends weren't born when I climbed Everest, and now that I give talks, there are more and more people that weren't born when I climbed Everest. So that he said that nobody knows about that. They've forgotten. You know, it's not a big deal. So I said, yeah, that's what I thought. It just slipped out. So it's not that big a thing anymore.
Yes, I went to see Bob Woodward, the Washington Post, famous person, talk at the University of Oklahoma last fall, and he had never shown the movie to his children until just a few weeks before this. And he said, well, what did you think? And I said, well,
what's the big deal?
that guy didn't look like you, Dad.
Oh.
and we don't even understand what this is all about.
Yeah, right. No, I know. I'm sure that.
He said, talk about bringing somebody back down to earth. Nobody can do
That's
it.
That's right. Than your kids. What better than
as
your
well
kids?
as the kids.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the guide service, how you established it, and some of your experiences with it.
Yeah. Well, we started guiding, both Louis and I started guiding 1949. And Bill Dunaway was a climber at that time, skier, a good skier, and so forth, and saw that maybe you could make a little money guiding people up the mountain in the summertime. So he started working up there, actually without a concession agreement at that time, back in '49. But then we did that for a few years, then after graduating from college, we were drafted into, both Louis and I were drafted into the Korean War, excuse me.
Let's mark.
But guiding was fun. We were up there at Paradise at 5,200 feet, a mile high, and take people up to the ice caves, which, by the way, the Paradise Ice Caves is gone now. In fact, the Paradise Glacier is gone. We used to take people in, talk about global warming. We used to take them in under the ice for a quarter of a mile. They look up at the blue, beautiful blue ice and glacier. The whole glacier's gone.
Well, we're talking Rainier here.
Yeah, Rainier. The whole glacier's gone. It's not there anymore. Anyway, but it was great up there doing that. We take people up to the ice caves and take them up to the summit. Did that for about 4 years. Then we're drafted into the Army. Came back, guided another year or two. But I stopped then because I became the first only full-time employee of REI.
Are you the father of REI?
In 1955. There were 20 people that got together in 1939 to import stuff from Europe so they could climb. But they needed somebody to run it in 1955, and so I was the only person in the store. I did the whole deal, locked the door, opened it up, rang the cash register, fit people in boots. I did the whole deal. I had some part-time help.
In Seattle?
In Seattle. That was our home place. So then guiding in 1966, my brother Lou wanted to get the concession started again, so he wanted to get the concession a permit, and so I talked to Scoop Jackson, Senator Scoop Jackson,
yes.
Henry, and he said, let's see what we can do. And I knew Udall because I was appointed to the National Parks Advisory Board. Bobby helped me get that, I guess, but anyway, you tour the national parks and so forth. And so I said, hey, my brother, I'd like to get this permit if I could. And so he said, we don't issue sub-permits, because somebody else had a permit for a horse guide system up on Rainier. They take them up the Skyline Trail on horses and so forth. But anyway, he got it. He said, okay, we'll do it. And so Louis got the permit at that time.
From the Park Service?
From the Park Service, yeah. And so he had the concession. So he kept the concession and did that, has done that now, since '66. He's had the concession.
Now, let's see, what would you be working on if you did the next one? Would it be 87 or 88 climbs?
No, 81. I tried to do it last year to get my 81st. My knees were just bummed out. They were just in bad shape. So I got a couple of knee replacements. So I'm going to take the doctor that did it up Rainier next summer. I've got 2 total knee replacements, stainless steel and Teflon. So that's what I decided to do because I couldn't walk comfortably, and walking has been a good part of my life.
This is a deal that you've cut, that you're going to go up. You're going to do 81 next summer?
Yeah. I'll acclimatize at Paradise. The lodge is closed. The parks. Let me tell you, there's so many things wrong with this administration, but I won't get started.
That would take. I don't have enough tape. But.
Yeah, you don't. But anyway, the hotel's closed. But I'll mill around up there for a while, maybe 5 days, then run up to walk up to Muir, come back down, and then a couple days later I'll climb. So that's my program.
And when will this be?
Last time I tried in August, and coming down on the rock is terrible. So I'll do it while there's still snow back at Paradise. It'll depend on the snow year. We've got a lot of snow this year. It'll depend on what happens next year. But I'll do it June or July with a full moon. You pick a full moon, you don't need a headlamp. Moonlight's reflecting off the snow. It's beautiful.
Back to Everest for a minute, there was something I forgot to ask you. Have they brought down the sitting woman who was frozen up there that everybody had to pass?
The what?
A woman who was climbing and sat down and froze, and they just left her there. Is she still there?
I don't know. I don't know what has happened with that. Most of the people, at least the mountaineers that die up there, would just as soon stay there. We left Jake in the ice fall, was killed on our expedition. And, you know, most people, I think, would say this is as good as being in a coffin somewhere else.
Well, I think Dick Bass expressed it very well when he was talking about Marty Hoy and her death up there. He said that's what she wanted, anything happens, to be left there. And so she's got the biggest tombstone in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so your friend joined the others.
Yeah, Jake, yeah, there's a lot of them up there, but, you know, and I think it's a fitting place.
Who do you associate with now who are more recent climber, Everest summiters? Do you know, have you talked to Conrad Anker, or I assume you knew Scott Fisher?
Yeah.
What do you think happened with that?
With Scott?
Yeah.
Well, you know, at high altitude you do dumb things. I spent 2 hours at 27,500 feet melting ice so I could have 2 quart bottles of water to take up to drink on the way to the summit. And I put them in the outside pocket of my pack, which is only a thin strip of nylon between it and the water bottle. Hell, it's 35 below zero when I stepped out of that tent, crawled out of the tent. And so Gamba and I were, you know, heading up, and about an hour later I was switching oxygen tanks, and I pull out the bottle and look at this chunk of solid ice, and then to show how really dumb I was, I put it back in the pack and carried it to the summit. Two bottles that I didn't need the weight of, you know. And so you do dumb things, and I'm sure that Fisher was really affected from lack of oxygen, and he was tired, I think. He was also motivated to get his clients to the summit. You know, that's a lot of money. And the other thing is the client is probably pretty well off, and is probably those CEOs and those senior management types are inclined to say, you know, we're going to go further. You're not going to tell me to turn around here. So those things happen, and I think it's really unfortunate. I think, you know, there's a little GPS system. I'm on the board. Was on the board of Magellan, the first GPS locator.
Yeah.
If they'd have, for $99, you could have found that camp coming back down, the ones that got lost. And it's right there in your deal. It tells you whether to go left or right, or you know, and it's a simple device. But it's mostly lack of oxygen, and you get dumb from lack of oxygen. There's no question. You're not thinking smart. People have left rope up there. They've got to the summit, left their climbing rope, you know, and they've gloves. On the Annapurna, Herzog left his boots, you know, different things. Yeah.
Talking about going to Antarctica, Jim, you're going at Thanksgiving of this year.
Yes.
And what are you going to be doing?
Well, it's about a 2-week trip. You fly down to Chile and then get on a boat and head over. There'll be 100 people, and it's actually I'll be participating in some lectures and so forth as a mountain climber, and there'll be scientists, glaciologists and so forth on board, some biologists, and it's sort of an educational thing with the group. And I've also managed, there's some people that will go, friends of mine that I've invited, and they'll be donating some money to a maritime center that's here in Port Townsend. We're raising funds for an environmental maritime center, which will introduce the children to the oceans, and the oceans connect us all. And so this will be part of that, and it'll be fun to see Antarctica.
Well, this leads into the great experiences you had that do not transcend your climbing, but you sailed with Diane and your sons to Australia.
Yeah, we took them out of school. They were 11 and 13, and the four of us got on this 53-foot pilot house ketch, and we sailed from here. The saying up here is you sail south until the butter melts, and then you head west. And so the butter melted in Puerto Vallarta, and we sailed down to the Marquesas and into the French Polynesia and all of that beautiful country.
How long did it take?
About 4 years for the whole deal. We spent a lot of time in Fiji, spent quite a bit of time in Australia. But we were planning on a circumnavigation, but we got started and enjoyed some of those places so much, we said, why should we push it? And then it became time for the children to get back into school. We'd taken them out long enough, and we got them back in time to get into college, and they're just about finishing college. But it was a great trip. You know, it's funny, I love the mountains, but I love the sea. And so when you're up in the mountains freezing your ass off, you're thinking, God, wouldn't it be nice to be down on a tropical island under a palm tree sipping a Mai Tai? And then you get down there after 2 or 3 years, and we were saying, wouldn't it be nice to be going up some alpine valley, you know, working our way up onto a nice warm rock climb and so forth. It's funny how that is, but the world is such a magical place that it's just nice to get out into it.
Well, you're gone. This took 4 years. Now, did you stop sometimes and fly back and see if Seattle's still here?
Yeah, we came back once, flew back and to check it out, and went back down again. We had, you know, some business, but mostly the 4 years were spent afloat. And it was a nice boat, and the children did extremely well. Joss was admitted into Brown and just had graduated from Brown University with honors. There were 14,000 applicants. They took 1,400, and he was one of them. I think it's because of his experiences sailing and climbing and all of the adventures that the boys had. They came back so far above their peers, John. They were just incredible how much they gained from that offshore experience.
Well, so they were homeschooled on the boat?
Yep, but we didn't homeschool them. We had books that we were going to do, but you know, it's a 21-day crossing to Marquesas, and what are you going to do? You can't study there. Then you get into these magical places, and you can't tell them, you're going to stay here 4 hours while we go explore the countryside, you know. So we really didn't homeschool them. I mean, I must admit that, but there was no television on board, and so they read. And so both boys, we got 4-point. Our other son is graduating from Western with a 4-point, and he's on the Dean's Honors List. And so it didn't hurt them at all, and we think, in fact, it probably helped them in their knowledge of the world at large.
No doubt. But Joss came back and was admitted
To Brown.
Immediately.
Yeah, well, he applied and said he'd like to go there, and so he applied and was admitted. So, no, we think it didn't hurt at all. You know, the good thing about it, John, sailing down, Diane and I had 3-hour watches.
I was going to get to that.
Every 3 hours you're going to be up on deck, because we don't hit a freighter, we don't, you know, or adjust the sails or do that stuff. So the boys, we didn't want out on deck at night. Too dangerous, even snapped in. So if somebody goes overboard, you've lost them. And so we sailed for 21 days, and we're on watch, and then we sailed across to Papeete and then over to Vanuatu, and then different islands and tropical places. And so the kids are gradually, learning it. So on the way back from Australia, and the good book says no one sails back from Australia because you're coming against the trades and against the current. And so we thought, are we going to do this? And we said, yeah, let's do it. So the boys by then can navigate, can reef sails alone, can handle the whole boat. Diane and I are down below 9 hours, and the kids like to be up at night. The boys are running the boat. We're laying down there, and they're guiding the boat up from Australia toward our home up in Port Townsend. And you're laying there thinking, my God, aren't they wonderful kids? And so what a feeling of sailing under those stars and going along, and you hear if they needed a reef, if it was really got to be a bad gale coming in, they'd pound on the deck or run down and say, we need some help with something. But they ran the whole deal, and they learned they're scuba divers, they're expert climbers, expert skiers, they got the whole deal. Yeah.
I can tell that you were in the Army because the Navy traditionally has 4-hour watches.
4-hour, yeah.
And you had 3?
We had 3. We felt we'd experiment around a little bit, but it's 3 hours is enough up there on deck and doing stuff, and you'd kind of doze a little bit, but after a while, if you're in the, you get used to it. You get used to that kind of a deal.
Sailing can be dangerous.
Yeah, but the good thing is your base camp traveling with you. You got your wine bottle down there. You got the food. You're not packing all this stuff. God, it's right moving with you. It's incredible. And people said, you can take the kids out there. How about pirates? And how dangerous it is out there? We said, how dangerous it is in middle school now, for God's sake, in the United States? Anyway,
yeah,
we had a ball.
Or walking into the synagogue or whatever. But in that, go back to the climbing, because you said you missed that, obviously. What was your most dangerous moment in your climbing career? Well,
I've been caught in avalanches. I've gone places where an avalanche has come down right after I've walked through it. Icefall has come down right after I walked through it. But I think probably the most dangerous, or the closest I came was on Mount Index. It's a rock peak up here in the Cascades. And I was younger and was saving money by not using pitons, which cost 35 cents a piece. And so I was taking long lead and got really in a bad spot. And if I'd have peeled off, I'd have taken Louis with me. We'd have gone down down an overhang and hit the rock, and then bounced into Lake Serene, which is at the foot of this high peak.
And what age were you?
By then I was about 19. We were about 19 years old. Yeah.
Any close calls on the 63 trip up to?
Well, I went up on the ice fall and put the route in it, and the second day Jake went up. I was the first one up on the ice fall because they called me the ice climber. We had a bunch of Teton guides that were like Unsold and some of the other rock climbers. Anyway, so I went up and put that route up. Next day Jake was killed, and when that wall came off that I'd put the rope up on. So, I mean, what you figure is that you're not going to, I've been lucky my whole life. We went down an avalanche off Rainier and bounced over a couple of crevasses and stuff. So, but I've been lucky, and I figured that when I climbed on Rainier and on Everest that I'd been pretty lucky, and I'd still continue to be lucky.
One of the things I've almost always asked people about, with some exceptions, is about gear on major climbs. They're noted for. And I asked Ken Henderson, who was talking about coming out to climb Gannett Peak, which is still not exactly a small approach. And he came from Dartmouth or wherever with some guys, and I said, well, Mr. Henderson, what did you wear when you went up Gannett Peak? And he said, my suit, of course.
Yeah. Wool.
And then I interviewed Brad and Barbara Washburn together, and I asked them, and they said, oh, we had just, we had war surplus.
Right. Oh, yeah, Army surplus.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that. We sold that at REI. Wool pants, you get wool pants, $3, and it was a good deal.
Well, tell me what you were wearing. What kind of gear did you have for '63?
Well, as we had access to the best equipment made. It was REI. So I was the equipment manager for the expedition. And so I had access to all the best crampons, all of the best climbing gear, best clothing. Actually, we went to Eddie Bauer for parkas. They were the best down supplier at that time. We made down sleeping bags, but they weren't of the quality that Eddie Bauer had. We actually sold Eddie Bauer sleeping bags at REI before they said, no, we're going to do factory to you direct, factory to customer direct. But we sold their bags and stuff. But anyway, we had good down clothing. We had wool. We had Woolrich. We had our boots were terrible compared to today because they're plastic now. But we had a triplex lower boot, so 3 layers of leather. Once they got wet, they stayed wet. And so
Who made them? Who made them?
A German company made those, but that was all you could get. That was the best at that time. We also had a reindeer boot that was made in Europe, but most of them were small size. I got frostbite in my toes trying to wear those things, so I had to go up with a lower. Willie wore his reindeer boots to the summit.
And tell me about the crampons. So they did the.
We had the Gravel 12-point, Gravel crampon, a Gravel ice axe, and Simone ice axe. We had both packs. We had some Kelty. A few people had Kelty, but I had a mechanical products donation, so all the rest of the guys had, and the Sherpa had mechanical product packs.
Years ago, I had a young friend climbing the Middle Teton, I guess, in the winter, and he got just about 3 feet from the top, and a crampon strap broke, and down he went. Have you ever had that happen, or been with somebody that had a?
I've been on the guide service. A lot of people step out of their crampons. They don't make them tight enough and so forth. In fact, I took a group of handicapped people up on Rainier, and the guy, one had a leg blown off in Vietnam. And so I'm up there, and he stepped out of his crampon. I'm tightening the thing. I say, how does that feel? And he said, hell, I don't know, Jim. That's an artificial foot. I'd forgotten he had. So, and somebody said, my toes are cold. And he said, you people with toes are always complaining. This guy had his leg blown off. But crampons come off. You have to, tighten them so. But I never had one come off in a very difficult place.
Dateline just did an hour program about 3 weeks ago about this guy Mazur. I'd never heard of him before. I think it's Mazure. And he was taking 2 clients up Everest, and they came across not the frozen woman, but a guy. And he had his parka open. You know about this?
No.
His gloves off, his hat off.
Is this a fable, or is it a real deal? Or?
Oh no, this is not like the Krakauer's docudrama into thin air. This just happened recently, and Dateline made it into an hour program, which isn't so difficult because you got 46 minutes or something out of the hour or less.
And when people die, it makes good copy.
Well, Missouri stopped, and miracle of miracles, because of what had been happening at that particular time about other people in trouble and just being passed by. And he stopped, and I think he asked his clients, you paid a lot of money, but are we can we live with letting this man sit here and not try to help him down? They said, no, yes, let's help him down. And he was so disoriented when they put the gloves on, he'd pull them off. They finally got some soup in him or something, and they got him down.
Good.
And then there's the controversy of the guy who had
Paid.
no, that had the 2 artificial legs,
Oh.
who just went up. And he's from New Zealand, and now the story is he finally confessed up in the hospital, as I understand it, and the rope led into a cave. And he went into...
Yeah, I think I read that.
Yeah,
somewhere.
went into a cave, and there's a guy in there,
Right.
alive.
Yeah.
And he now admitted that he just clipped
Went
out.
by him.
Yeah, and clipped in above him and went on up.
Yeah.
And but he didn't. He changed his story once he got in the hospital, and then his stumps froze and his hands froze. Anyway, I think it's so you would stop too, right?
Well, we always figured when we climbed that we'd had to save enough energy to be able to haul out someone that couldn't make it. So we always planned on our own rescues, and that was sort of the philosophy of climbing in those days. And so you wouldn't know; you'd never leave somebody up. We knew there were people that would do that. I won't mention names, but there are some people that weren't invited on expeditions simply because they were single-mindedly would concentrate on getting themselves up and not be humanitarian. But no, but it's a tough call, you know. Maybe they thought the guy's going to die anyway, or you know, I mean, there's so many excuses, and I'd say let's not judge them too much until we're right up there on that fixed rope and see this guy, and you know, then you can decide what you would do.
Yeah, but it might be a good idea not to lie about it.
Well, that's true. Oh no, that's true.
Come up with some funny story.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, this has been great. You told me a few years ago that if I tracked you down in Seattle, you'd do an interview, and here I am. You've done it. And,
Yeah,
and it's been wonderful to talk to you.
Well, I've been lucky. They're the first American to ascend a K2, climb Everest, peace climb, handicap people, you know, and doing REI stuff and all of that. It's been I've been lucky. It's been a lot of fun. And
one thing I did want to cover.
Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting you. Because you were in the Army and you went out to Camp Hale in Colorado, where the 10th Mountain Division trained for World War II.
Yes.
And stayed there almost through the war. Last summer I was up in Breckenridge with my son, and he bought me a pocketbook about the 10th Mountain Division, which I read on my trip to Italy. And of course I was down at the bottom and they were up on the other end of the country. But have you ever talked to Bob Bates and some of those guys that were in on the technical people of the 10th when it was formed?
for training, oh yeah, yeah. No,
You swap stories with them?
Yeah, because I'm, you know, well, you've seen the pictures in my book, A Life on the Edge, of me in over whites and camouflage and so forth. And, you know, it was, actually it was a good 2 years of serving our country by teaching climbing and skiing to the 10th Special Forces. So,
Yeah.
you know,
But they were special forces by then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had the Green Beret, and so we taught them rock climbing and sort of expedition skiing, camping out in the winter, and all of that stuff. So,
We meaning?
no, my brother Lou and I. Yeah,
okay.
we stayed. The two of us stayed together during. At that time, twins could stay together even though we were drafted for war. They kept the two could stay together if they wanted. So we said, yeah, we'd stay together.
And how long were you in the service?
2 years.
Ooh.
Yeah, right after college, graduated, and my deferment ran out with Louis, and we were drafted into the Signal Corps down in San Luis Obispo, California. But I wrote a letter. Had Osborne and Hewlin was a sporting goods store we worked in part time in the winter, and in Seattle. And Osborne was 10th Mountain from World War II, and he wrote a letter to the commanding officer of Camp Hale and said, I got a couple of pretty good guys here that are in the Signal Corps down in San Luis Obispo. They could probably teach you Army fellows a thing or two. And he said, I really recommend them. So we're sitting down there dismantling an M1 carbine, and this guy comes in and says, shows this thing on the desk, says, you guys are being transferred, and here's this thing to Camp Hale, Colorado. Man, I said, what a deal. The whole company went to Korea, and Louis and I went to Colorado, teaching skiing and climbing for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's great.
Hell of a deal.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks much. See you around at, probably at Bend. I saw something, I don't know what the date for the next year's meeting, but I know it's going to be in Bend, Oregon.
Is that it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, wherever that is.
Yeah, well, that's not far away.
Well, everybody wants to go climb on Smith Rock. So when I was there at the headquarters in July, I said, you know, what's wrong with Tucson in the middle of the winter?
Yeah.
And we got a mountain that's got pretty good stuff on it. You know, I think almost, I don't know what the highest rated one is, but I've climbed there. Yeah. Unfortunately, my climbing partner was killed on a trail it gave out. But I don't know. Recently they've been.
But it was back east the last.
Yeah, in the middle of, like in the White Mountains or someplace. Yeah. Where they had to split up hotels.
Yeah, so they can come out to the West Coast for a little bit.
Well, Tucson can be pretty terrific about January or February, whenever.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
All right, John, thank you.